So when you came to do the young ones, they basically created a sort of slot for you every week to do something. And that programme, if you were a teenager in Britain in the 80s, when the young ones came on, it was an amazing thing where you felt like, for the first time, there was something in a piece of light entertainment that had some relationship with people that you knew, your understanding of the world, the things you found ridiculous. It had a adolescent energy level, and yet it was much cleverer than its critics realised, because it was referencing all sorts of smart-ass things that you would only know about if you, you know. And I mean, it's impossible to underestimate the impact of that, I think.
Yeah, and I knew as soon as I saw I think the script for the pilot, I thought this is what I should have been doing all along. That I shouldn't have really, I don't know, OTT made me a national celebrity, I suppose, but I thought if I could just have waited for the young ones to come along, then really I needn't have gone through all that nightmare that I went through with OTT. You know?
Well, how much freedom did Ben Elton and Lisa Mayer get in writing it and in casting it? Because it always seemed to me, seeing the comic strip films, that Peter Richardson should have been the Mike character.
Yeah, well, but that's a famous. I mean,
Right.
That Peter was such a. Peter and Paul Jackson hated each other, right? Not from the start, but pretty early on. That part, the Mike role was obviously written for Peter Richardson, and then he had a row with Paul and called him a cunt and stormed off. You know, I actually sort of think that it's better that there's not another. It might have overbalanced if there'd been another comic. If Peter had been, I mean, obviously Chris Ryan is a thankless task playing Mike, but I think it's better that he does it, you know, than yet another comic, really. But yeah, Peter won. I mean, that's why. I mean, Peter's an extraordinary control freak, isn't he? And that's why he did the comic strip, and he was in charge of absolutely everything, you know.
I mean, you write in it about how the energy levels and the violence and the danger in it were achieved basically by people putting themselves in dangerous, violent, unsupervised situations, and then often having to finish the shoot in front of a studio audience with a bleeding head or whatever. Kind of, you get that from Rick and Aid's stunts in those ones.
There was no safety gear. There was explosions, and you know.
You had an explosion go off in your face, didn't you? No, that was in the film, wasn't it?
That on Gorky Park, which I write about. I had an explosive charge on my head. That had no backing. It was. Well, I mean, you also asked about. I mean, you asked about casting Rick and Lisa and Ben. We just cast our mates, by and large. If you think that.
I know,
you know, everybody's in there, Jim Barclay and Tony Allen. The amount of negotiation that it took to get Tony in that fucking show.
Right.
I think he actually put it in the thing that he had to turn to the camera and make a kind of statement about it.
Yeah, Tony Allen was extremely principled sort of refusenick, wasn't he? And still is. And
I think Keith wasn't in it, but Dawn and Jennifer, to say that, you know, Jim Barclay, Steve Frost, Mark Harden. You know, I think they would cast their mates first of all, and then
the regulars from the Comedy Store was the first sort of alternative comedy club, I suppose, wasn't it? And the regulars there were yourself, Tony Allen, Jim Barclay, Andy De La Tour, Pauline Melville.
Pauline
wasn't there. Was Arnold Brown there?
Arnold was there every week,
But when the comic strip opens down the road, 18 months later, about 200 yards away, and that is yourself, Rick Mail, Nate Edmondson, French and Saunders.
French and Saunders come slightly later.
Yeah, but it had a higher hit rate for people that became household names.
Yeah.
Why do you think that was? Because it didn't have the political edge, or because they weren't people that were, the stuff was more palatable in some ways, or were they, or had the ground rules been laid so they were able to do more stuff with them?
Because they were better.
Because they were better.
Basically. They were just better.
Right. In the in the book, you write about when Robin Williams came to the Comedy Store, which at that point would have been going about 6 months, I suppose.
Yeah. I guess, yeah.
You say he got in a cab, and he said to a cab driver, "Take me to a comedy club." And you wonder what the cab driver knew that meant he took him to the Comedy Store, because it could equally have well been the Circus Tavern, Purfleet.
Yeah.
He would have ended up on a 1970s mainstream
bill with Jiminy Cricket.
With Jimmy Cricket,
Yeah.
And then he would have. And so again, it's really amazing that it happened, because if he'd arrived in London a year earlier and said, "Take me to a comedy club," there wouldn't have been anywhere anyway.
No, there might
Which
have been.
again, interesting. An American would assume there must be.
Yeah.
But there wasn't in the same way.
Must have been the talk of the town.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
So what was so did you know him as a stand-up then, or did you just know him from like Morecambe Mindy and things like that?
I just knew him from Morecambe Mindy. But
So you didn't know what it was going to be like?
I don't know if no, although I wasn't surprised. You could see that he was a stand-up. I mean, I liked watching Morecambe Mindy. I mean, again, because it was shown as a kids' show, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But you knew it was a much more, that there was a much cleverer mind.
Yeah.
And also the girl, I mean, Pam Dorber is adorable.
She was really funny.
Yeah, and then funny as well, you know. Yeah. There's a real chemistry between them. And I just knew that Robin was a comic from watching him on Morecambe Mindy. You could see that he would basically be doing stand-up really for minutes on end, really, in a spacesuit.
Well, you know, you need a suit to define the character. You know.
And I think by then I might have read about him or something. I can't remember. But I knew.
So what was it like seeing that sort of American act in Britain in 1979 at that short, close distance, at close range?
It was incredible. It was the first time I saw him. It was extraordinary. Just to, I think I was saying about, I felt like I'd been kicked down the stairs laughing.
It would be difficult for people to have plagiarised your act in that period, wouldn't it, word for word, because it had a particular vocabulary and a particular sensibility. But obviously there was an energy level about it that was unlike anything else we'd seen.
Yeah.
And and in fact, the idea that the alternative comedian was someone who shouted a lot about swearing, that became, you must have done really well, because that became the tabloid stereotype of them, didn't it? You know,
that was a description of me. But I used to preempt that, didn't I? I mean, that was my opening line at the comic strip, was say, "I'm an alternative comedian, I'm not funny, I'm non-sexist, I'm non-racist. So if you don't laugh at me, you're a Nazi shitbag."